Hello to everybody. Once again, I'm here in front of the camera to say some words, to share some points. So the first, just briefly, here everything is fine. The virus hasn't reached here. And now the Indian central government and the state government, they are coordinating together, and they have the system saying red zone, yellow zone, and green zone. And not just the state itself, but also within the state, the district, they call it. Districts are quite big. So then they go into districts. Unfortunately, our district is at the moment in a red zone. So from our district, we can't go to our neighbor district, which is just, our main town that we go to shopping is in the different district, which is green. So we can't go. And on one hand, it is unfortunate. On the other hand, it is good. So we can't venture again to that town. So that is how it is. So yeah, the virus hasn't reached here. So we are still in a lockdown mode, and so we are waiting. Today's the 1st of May, isn't it? So on 3rd, they may sort of announce new structure or new rules. We're just waiting for that, and then we will see how. But basically, we want to keep it as much as we can. The self-lockdown system that we have at the moment. Okay, that's a brief sort of report. Okay, now we are going to the reading by Tsongkhapa, the words of advice for the lay practitioner. That's the short text that we are reading. And we finished up to verse 8. So today we will cover verse 9 and 10, because the most of the things what need to say in verse 9 is already said, and I will briefly touch on that verse 9, and then say a little bit on detail in the verse 10. So the overall, the advice is given by Tsongkhapa to the lay practitioner, that it said, but for the beginner, really to see and to understand and to realize this human existence that we have or that we are. Though it's not perfect, there are difficulties, there are shortcomings, and there are challenges with this body and this mind. Nevertheless, if we use this human existence in a more constructive way, more sort of more wisely, it has a tremendous potential for our long-term benefits. When I say long-term, it's not necessarily I'm talking about something life after life after life, but even long time, we talk about tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, and next decades. So therefore, and that's the one important point that he raised, and important for us to reflect on that, remind ourselves, contemplate on that again and again, more in a traditional way, like the 8 leisures and the 10 the fortunes and so on and so forth. But also more not necessarily going to that kind of very traditional list, but deeply contemplating what are the potential, what are the, what you call the capability, what are the external facility that I have if I want to do something, my long-term benefits, not just myself, but also others. That is the first point that Tsongkhapa raised. And the second point, which is, the relation to that, and then think about this human existence is very fragile, by its nature, and how it's come into being, and it's the combination of all these building blocks of this body. And looking at all those things, then understand the fragility, or which is easy to be lost in the Buddhist terms. Thinking along the nature of impermanence. And then that is more, Tsongkhapa taught us, to reflect on nature of impermanence, relation to the death, which is, inevitable, cannot be avoided. And the time of the death, when it's going to come, is very uncertain, and reflect on those areas. And then, the next one is, next point is, if that is the case, what should I do? What should I do? And what then bringing what you call the understanding of our actions while we are alive, while we just have mind and body, with how can we structure our activities of the body, speech, and mind. This is sometimes I find it's quite useful, because in the Buddhist, the teachings, and these three are quite often the term is used, three doors, osum, three doors. Why they are called three doors? Because all our activities, actions, all karma, all our actions with the intention, without intention, in the sense due to deep, the familiarity, all those actions, some are positive, some are negative, some are neutral, they're all sort of, what you call emerge, come through these three, the body, speech, and mind. Therefore, they are called three doors. So that he talked about that, and then, briefly touch on, the important to understand all our actions have consequences. Consequences are matching with the actions. The results, consequences concorded with the actions that we do. And so that is another important point he made, he raised. Then, the next point, saying some of the practical, that we can do, to really create conducive environment within ourselves, around us, and also our behavior, our activities, actions. Then taking like a 5 lay precepts, either all 5, or the 1, 2, 3, whatever that you are ready to take the precepts, and those are the lifelong precepts, and then also the 24 hours, that day long, 1 day precepts, those 8 precepts. So those are the things, and also which I briefly touch on to say that taking precepts, is, way to enhance our ethical living, very intentionally, very, deliberately, consciously taking the precepts, then abiding or, keeping the precepts, whatever we have taken, and to remind ourselves. In that way, we can, gradually, our bodies, activities of our body, speech, and mind become more constructive, the less destructive, less those unhealthy actions. And that way to benefit to ourselves, that way to benefit to people and other living beings who live close by, and also indirectly for, for example, what you call the lay, from the lay precepts. One thing, one out of those 5 lay precepts, Tsongkhapa clearly pointed out that, importance of not, using intoxicants. I mean, he here clearly talk about, the alcohol drink, but that can be, as I mentioned, these are changing, aren't they, the sort of intoxicants. At his time, in that environment in Tibet, around 14th century, I don't think there is a cannabis available. I don't know, or there's ecstasy, or all those strange drugs. Fortunately, I saw only in the I don't know, fortunate or unfortunate. I haven't experienced any of those drugs. We talk about. Sometimes people say, no, you have to experience that. I'm not sure. As one of my friends, I will tell you this. This is a nice story. When I was a student here, as a naughty young naughty monk, I like going to cinema very much. Watching those Bollywood films, and one of my friends, not very much interested in that part, but he has a habit to have what you call snap, snap that made out of what you call the tobacco and some other things. He loved that, and I not at all. I have no interest having, even though I don't want to sit close to those people. Smell and the sneezing and all this having, you have to first. I teased him saying, first you have to take in, but then soon after you take in, snap, in, then you have to blow out. And so whatever the reason, I don't have that, that interest. So that sort of things, the very useful, important, practical things that we can do. For example, when you take the 8 24 hours precept, you don't have to have somebody to give you that precept. You can take in front of image of Buddha, or I usually say in front of, imagine all those great beings, then take 24 hours. I will not, I will refrain from doing these 8 things, and then, to benefit to myself, to others, whether it's minor precepts or not, with whatever label that we give it. It is, yes, of course, giving level, some label, sometimes it happens what it is. But, sometimes very useful to do that. And, just refraining one day, we may find, it's very insignificant. But, it has consequences. It has consequences. So that is, those are the things that we have already covered. So those points which are, because, once again, briefly touch on to touch on those points that remind ourselves what we have, read, discuss the points. Okay, helpful. Now, so today's first reading is verse 9. If what you do brings on suffering eventually, though it may appear in the moment as happiness, then do not do it. So that is the main sort of first two lines in Tibetan. Kangla jebe puksu dongelna teldo dewa nang demicha. So this is, talking about in certain extents to remind ourselves, that when Buddha taught his first teaching, the Four Noble Truths, and within the Four Noble Truths, when he taught the first Noble Truth, that is Noble Truth of suffering. And then, when he lists sufferings in the sutra, lists different levels of suffering. Some are very obvious, like, illness, sickness, aging, death. Some are not that obvious immediately as a suffering, but eventually more we spend time, more we have, and when time passes, that, initially to appear as some kind of desirable, some kind of, that we like to have it. But then even gradually it turns into, undesirable, brings dissatisfaction, and so on and so forth. I mean, it is also to do not just something outside there, not that levels, it is also to do our minds too. So in other words, when the suffering is understood, what is here as a dukkha, and commonly explained in three stages: suffering of change, pervasive suffering. So here we are talking about other two, not the suffering of suffering, but the initially suffering of change, initially appear as a desirable. But then when we spend time, it will bring pain and difficulties. So that's happening, all the time in our life, in our daily lives. In our daily lives. So this is what he is saying, to have good thinking, to, in others, have a good strategy, good planning, not to what in Tibetan, I think the expression is quite dramatic and sometimes not very nice for the Westerners. It says, I will say in Tibetan first, Kidang lo teba mache. That means, don't act as if a dog saw a lump of meat. A dog, hungry dog, encounter a lump of meat without any hesitation, immediately put into to immediately try to eat. So I said, don't do that. Investigate, analyze. And that's important. That is very important. That way, many of our, that endless actions, endless activities that we do number will reduce. Because many of those, our endless, the things, they do not bring that much long-lasting happiness. Although temporarily they may have some sense of joy, pleasure. Here it's not, once again, I want to repeat that. Here it's not saying don't enjoy the worldly happiness. Buddha listed there are many worldly happiness. enjoy it, but at the same time be aware of that. That is the message. That's the message. So that's what here it says. Then the last two lines in this verse. After all, food beautifully cooked with the mixed, but mixed with poison is left untouched, is it not? So in other words, talking about a person who understands, although the food in his or her plate in front of her, him or her, they're beautifully, nice smell, beautifully arranged. Particularly those famous chefs when they cook. Although maybe once or twice I may have this, the famous chefs cook food, but when I watch from time to time those famous cooks, the food, even just looking that makes me, I don't want to eat that because the quantity is too small. Big plate, and in the middle there's a big plate. There's small, just maybe two or three spoons. After that, nothing's left. But then there are so many, small lines with the whatever different what you call the honey or whatever to put this in. So anyway, what I'm saying is this. So the person who knows, although in front of him or her, the food looks very delicious, very beautifully arranged, but if he knows it has poison, he will not eat unless he is stupid. So that is what here nice example is giving. So in other words, saying to understand immediate and the long term. Immediate pleasure should not be just think the immediate pleasure or happiness. Also think about the long term, and particularly people who believe the long-term consequences are not only in this lifetime, but also it may remain in the next life after. Then have need to think it again. So that's the verse 9. Now then the verse 10. The verse 10 moved to another very nice, simple practice that we can do. So it says this: to the three jewels, make prayers and offerings each day. Work hard to be wholesome, confess previous wrongs, strengthen your vows again and again, dedicating all merit for the enlightenment. So there are 3 or 4 things are mentioned in here, and I'm sure many of you, people who are Buddhist and been in Buddhist quite some time, I think you do this maybe in a daily basis. So it says, to take to the 3 jewels, make offerings. So in other words, out of the seven limb practice, sometimes that's called in Tibetan Yangla Dumba, 7 different activities of practice that put into one group or one sort of list. That out of 7, the first one is making offerings. And here, obviously, talk about 3 jewels. The making offerings can be also looked at in the giving to the others who needs, without any what you call the self-interest, without any something return back expectation, to really That is what. Although in the spiritual, in the Buddhist, and also in other spiritual tradition, making offerings to those great beings is more universal. Like, for example, offering lights, candlelight, incense, flowers. It seems the universal, the activities. Almost all the world major religions, religious traditions have those practice, or making offerings. But here, we need to understand what is the implication, what is the purpose of making offerings, and that is important to understand. Here, the purpose of making offering is to deal with our attachment, and that is the purpose. That our, unable to let go. This very, what in English you have an expression, tight fist. Fist tight or tight fist, yeah. So that is the purpose of making offerings. And that, if that's the main purpose, if that's the main reason, that can be done in many different ways. Not just to the Buddhas, not just to the Three Jewels, although, from the teachings point of view, it says it has great benefits. I agree. But, it can be done in many different ways. And sometimes culturally, if we don't understand some of these, the reasons of these practices, the practices themselves may become completely opposite of what is the reason of those practices. Like, for example, East, we have this culture making offerings to the Buddhas and Sanghas and expecting something positive results. And if that is the main reason, then it goes to the opposite of the purpose of making offerings. Of course, I'm not saying you will not get any positive consequences, because talking about law of cause and effect, but that shouldn't be the reason. If that is the reason, then what in English you have an expression, you lost the plot. I don't know. It is the right expression or not, I don't know. Anyway, so making offerings doesn't need to be big, doesn't need to be, there's something spectacular. Of course, if they are, it's great, but offer with pure heart to the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, to those people who need. And that is the first. Prayer and offerings, Kunjo Chaba. Then the next one is, do virtuous activities. It says, work hard to be wholesome. These two goes together. The virtuous activities and restraining or confessing the negativities. Gyawa Sakpa, Tikpa Changwa. The Gyawa Sakpa, that means, although the term is not that good, the accumulating the virtues, Tikpa Shapa, confessing the negativities. And those are the two. And what does that mean? What does that mean, accumulating the virtues? The meaning of accumulating the virtues, it means making ourselves, making our minds, thoughts, emotions more susceptible to do those virtuous things, like the cultivation of love, cultivation of compassion, cultivation of altruism, to enhance, to nurture these wholesome, these useful minds, emotions and thoughts and behaviors within ourselves. We have to create the condition. And that's what really the meaning of accumulating the merits. I keep saying this when I touch on this topic. There isn't somewhere in the, up here, some of the Christian saints and also some Buddhist those icons have some kind of moon round up there. There isn't a virtue up here, and sometimes that go around spin very quickly, sometimes very slow. There isn't that sort of virtues in there. It is ourselves and our minds, our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors make, to make it, I usually call, make it more susceptible to do these, the wholesome things. And then the next one is the confessing the negativities, confess previous wrongs. So, and that is also useful, as some of you know, again, that is more seems universal practice. Almost all the spiritual traditions have this confessing practice. In Buddhism, to do the confessing your negativities, you have to have those 4 factors, 4 factors or 4 powers. In Tibetan, it's called Dokshi. And those are the very important. Without those 4 factors within ourselves, very, very, very strongly and very vividly, the other physical and verbal or, those confessing will not bring that much impact. Those 4 factors are, first of all, to have a, overall the himself or herself confessing that what he or she is confessing, and his or her mind should be in a very positive, very constructive, very very sort of like a field. If you want to grow some crops, the field should be prepared. In Tibetan, that factor is called tengito. And traditionally, that is explained. Take refuge, bring a strong bodhicitta, take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha with that mind. What does that mean? That means before you do the confessing, your general state of mind is already in a very positive, constructive state. Strong compassion is very useful. That's the first factor. Tenjito, the force, the force or the power of foundation. Have a good foundation to do that. Tenjito. And the second is, gyoba, regret, deep sense of regret. Regret because you acknowledge, you see, you understand, those mistakes are made. With your with your own choice, or without your choice, for example, from the Buddhist point of view, out of, by the power or the influence of 3 poisons, attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Although those are part of your mind, these are not somewhere out there, part of your mind, these lead you to do those things and to acknowledge it. And these actions have, unpleasant consequences to yourself and to others, immediately and in the long term. When we realize that, when we understand that, then there is a genuine deep sense of regret, remorse will have. And that's important. If we don't have those our past wrongdoings, if we don't have that understanding, their consequences, then regret or remorse will not grow. Or even if we try to remorse, it is, there's no deep, genuine gut feeling remorse. If you don't have gut feeling, deep down remorse, the past mistake, very easily to do the same things again. So that is the second one, very important. Regret. Then, of course, the actual, the power of remedy. That is really, applying the antidote. Although there are like a strong recitation of mantras and are recommended, like the 1,000 syllables of the Vajrasattva and the other deities, the Kulu Kulu and so forth. But the most powerful antidote is to bring the complete opposite mental state. Like anger. Out of anger, you have done the wrong things. Bring a deep sense of love, compassion. And that is the actual antidote. Those are the actual antidote. They will really counteract with those, and very important, very useful. And then the last one is making determination, not to do the similar things again. This and the second one have a connection. The determination will have, if we understand the seriousness of the wrongdoing and their consequences, then determination will grow. These are not not connected of each other. They all have connection, although listed as 4 powers, but they all have connection. So that is the. So today we will leave it here, reading this, and we'll come back to our next reading, the remaining. Okay. Yeah. Now then, the reading of the Params. So we are reading this again, very beautifully written by the first Dalai Lama, Gendun Duk, and who was the founder of Great Tashinumbu Monastery. And he wrote this beautiful, verse form praise to Tara, or not just praise, to really like the requesting or whatever term that you use. And in that long, it is relatively long prayer, and there are 8 verses, particularly related to, relation to the Tara, to saying protect us from these 8 fears. And all 8 fears are related to our mental state. The first one is negative pride. Second one is ignorance. Third one is, I think, hatred. Fourth one is jealousy, envy. And those are that we have done. And they're all nicely, illustrated with the different, like animals, lions, or other like the, and hatred is illustrated like a fire which is in a very engulfing or consuming all the, jungles, beautiful jungles, and he, talking about beautiful, those virtues, and that is consumed by the hatred and anger. And also our last reading was the fourth one, which is jealousy. So today our reading is fifth one, and this is in the Buddhist Abhidhamma texts. Abhidhamma texts are the one of the most important texts to really to understand our mental states, then the nature, the fashion of how they talk about, then sometimes in the list of different mental states, different list of different mental states, and in those Abhidhamma texts, the afflictions, the pneumon afflictions. Of course, there are positive, mindsets are listed, but also here we are talking about negative or negative mindsets. And the afflictions are divided into many different lists. One way of dividing afflictions into list is this: Tawa Nyamongchen, Taming Nyamongchen. That means afflictions which related with the view, philosophy, view in the sense, philosophy, I don't know whether it's the right word or not, because in Western philosophy we have some positive connotation. So view, and affliction which related to the emotion. Some afflictions are emotion, like anger, like jealousy, like envy. These all are emotional related afflictions, distorted mental states. Some afflictions are view in the sense thought, not just pure emotion, have a thought, reason-based in certain extents, reason-based, thinking-based, therefore it's called view. So today the fifth one is related to that. And that is, called tangin, the wrong views, or the mistaken views. Yeah. Tangin. And that is wrong view is here illustrated as a robbery. Robbery when people rob your things. What in English you have thief, or what you call the people who come to your home and take it, burglar, robber, and so many things. Anyway, and here, may I be protected from the wrong view, like the robber who robs your things. And so this verse is in Tibetan. So tulshuk member, that means the tulshuk is behavior, very what you call the particularly constructed behavior, particularly through the religious belief, through the cultural belief, through the some other influence belief. You behave in a very particular fashion. Tulshuk. In general, tulshuk means behavior. Joba in Tibetan, joba is behavior. But tulshuk, it has a little bit different meaning, although it also can be just behavior. You adopted a particular behavior due to your belief, due to your culture, due to your all those things, then you adopted a particular behavior. And that behavior can be very, here member means very low, literally low. Low in the sense not very constructive, not very virtue. Not virtue, not constructive. That way, that will sort of behavior will destroy all those virtues of the towns, and the cities. In other words, virtues which are very beautiful, very nice, like towns and cities, and people who have that kind of wrong behavior, and due to those wrong behavior, that will destroy those virtues, like Durgun Jigrongda. Tache Nyangam Tangla Rabjushin. So then Tache, this is which I last time one maybe here or the reading the other one, I didn't manage to say that. Tache, it has two meanings. Tata, the extreme of eternalism. That is the word tata. Ta is the extreme. So holding the extreme view of eternalism. Eternalism in the sense, although things are existed, although things are, they come into being, come into existence, then go into non-existence, and, coming and going, dependently originated, dependently arising, but holding, some kind of eternalism, some kind of, what's called static, not dependent on other factors. That holding that kind of view is called a view of eternalism, extreme view of eternalism. And the other one is Cheta, extreme view of nihilism. Nihilism in the sense, although things are happening, things are, causes, produces results, results are due to the different factors, and so on and so forth, big or small, they're all connected, related, dependent on, they're all functioning, but, deliberately, due to certain views, deliberately sort of believing they are not, not what's called, not saying non-existence, but they are not related to the cause and conditions, and so on and so forth. And that's what here view of nihilism, and which, these two views can be talked in many different, dependent on different, what's called the context. So people who hold one of these two views, extreme views, they are like a running or, going into huge desert island or desert place. In the desert place, there's nothing, only either just what's called sand, or there's nothing, just, there's no plants or anything, any other animals, completely dry desert. So nyangam ki tang. So that is, so people who hold that those views have and then what they will do, and this related to the other previous one too, they will destroy the joys and happiness, the usefulness and beneficials of the towns and cities. These towns and cities are more like analogies. It is not saying towns and cities are virtuous and wholesome. It is saying because robbery, they come and rob the towns and cities, their richness, what they have. And that is what here the analogy is used. Holding wrong view will take it away, all those virtues, wholesome, usefulness, constructiveness, they will rob all those virtues. So the wrong view, so what is wrong view then? What is wrong view? Then that can be talked about, according to the context, wrong view. For example, from the Buddhist point of view, in a very early stage, we can talk about wrong view is, if you hold a view, our experiences, happiness, joy, fulfillment, or the pain, difficulties, they are not related to our previous actions. They are just accident. Or saying, what I do right here and now, whatever I want, they don't have any consequences coming years and years, in months and years. If somebody holds that kind of view, from the Buddhist point of view, that is wrong view. That's wrong view. With the context of that particular Buddhist practice and Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist, as I mentioned the other day. Or wrong view can be looked at in relation to the understanding of nature of things and events. For example, Buddha taught about dependent origination, dependently arising, interconnectedness. Nothing is, inherent, intrinsic, or nothing is in and of themselves. All are dependent on others coming into being. That is the view that the Buddhist teachers, starting from the Buddha and Buddhist teacher, hold that view. If somebody holds completely opposite to that, that is wrong view. And that's talking about from the Buddhist point of view. Why they are wrong view? Because they are wrong view due to holding the opposite view. Your mindset, your mental state will bring either attachment or aversion or ignorance. They will lead more into one of those three poisons. Therefore, holding opposite of those views is called wrong view. Yeah? So that's okay. That is the things which today's relation to the reading this Tara, 8 fears. Okay, we will do saying the praises to 21 Taras. Then we'll end today's. Yeah. Podalai ne jone, tami jango ne junshi, eba midi ula jen, tu sum sanje tinem, doma koje shezozo, hada kami chubenji, shabji bemo la tut, pomba gunle dunze ma, doma yom la chaze. Om je ze ma pama drama la cha ze lo cha ze drama ni ma ba jin ne ge ji lo dan da ji den song gun chu ji xie ji kai sa ji wa cha ze dong ge da wa gun do kang wa jian ne zhe wei xian da ma dong da cao ba nam ji ra do che wei ra cha ze shen ren chen ne ge de bei mei chen ne ba ra ge Jimba Zundu Kadubu Shewa Sepa Samden Chu Changze Te Shinshe We Zo Dora Taye Nambara Jawa Chen Malu Baro Jimba To Be Jawe Seki Shindo Ten Changze Duda Rahung Yi Ge Dedang Chotam Jinen Tumbo Shabye Nen De Luba Meba Gu Changze Gyajin Mela Tsang Ba Long La Maso Che 정보론란 제사 남한다 뉴진 소개 되네 창제 대제 자당 배제 바로 주고라고 예고연장 샤비는데 나버로 주고하신 거 봐라 창제 둘이 제보 전보 되게보 주게 전에 천년된 제 더 탐제 만들었어 창제 군조 선전 자게 세메토가 남아게 말을 저게 콜로겐 베랑게 성주 창제 rab도 가와지 베 우진 외지 청와베 셰바랍제 도다라에 도당 제된 왕도제 Changze sashi kyungwe tso nama tamje guba nima Chonye yawa yigin honge pongpa tamje nama rjo Changze dawe dombo u jen yamba tamje shindo wara Lebe chonye waba me dabare shindo wara Changze gebe tama me dara barwe chingwe wene Yejan yungum kune koro te jaye kune Changze sashi ngala chanke telgi nujin shaki dong Chonye jenze yige honge rinpa tenpo namnege Changze tema gema shi ma nyangen deshin Sowa omda yanda denbe dikpa chenpo chomani Changze kune koro kawe jaye rune namarge Ige jubu ngane gobe ripa honge chomani Changze turi shamne da pe honge nambe sabe Rira menda radang bi je jiden sumna yawani Changze lai tsoe na be rita tajin chana Tara niju pegi yige duna malu pane sem Changze lai tsonam ge bo hadang nyam chi ten Gune goja kawa ji ge zeda menam ngenpa sem Changze nima dawa ye be jinyi pala rup sem Hara niju duda ra ye shindo tabu rime sem Changze tini sumnam kwe be shive tuda nyanda de Duda rana niju so nama jomba turi rajo Zawe nga di duba di na Changze wane niju za Changju senjo renpo che ma je pa na ma je yo je ba nyam ba me ba kong ne kong du e wa sho ka re ra we kor we shin gam de pen dan de wa ma nu jong me jen re se wa den jin ja zo sha be se de pa to den yo che Oh yeah, thank you. I have a biscuit. Anyway, yeah. Thank you. And I'll see you next time. And, have a peace, relaxation, and do whatever you can to support others through following those safety instructions. And that's what we need to carry on our lives. We can't stand still because of this virus. We have to continue, but with taking all the precautions, the means and methods, then enter into doing things which are useful, helpful to yourself and others. So anyway, I'll see you next time.